opening words today are by the Reverend Matthew Johnson. For 5,000 years or more than 15,000 generations, human beings have been invoking spiritual power. My predecessors and yours have gathered together to make sense of their lives and their place in the cosmos. And they have spoken aloud and invited what they conceived as sacred and powerful to be with them. They called upon the spirits of air and earth, fire and water. They called the bear and the deer. They called for the raven to protect them. They pleaded for the heroes of old to slay the monsters of their fears. They sang songs they learned from their grandparents and moved in the appointed ways, or in ways that were new but felt like the right thing to do. And they imputed power to these spirits and to the memories of those heroes. They called them gods, and they were invoked. Vishnu and Kali, Elohim, Odin, and 100 million others. Every group of people, everywhere. They gathered to make sense of their lives and to make sense of their place in the cosmos, and they called these spirits to be present to them. And so do we. So do we. We gather this morning to make sense of ourselves and this universe in which we live as best we are able. And we call ourselves to worship together. And we invoke the power and wonder of life itself, that to which all those spirits of animals and memories of heroes pointed the way. We invoke that power, which is, we know, always around, always with us, but which we sometimes forget about. We forget that we are part of the whole of creation. We forget that we are stardust. We forget that we are capable of miracles, first among them, that we can love. We forget these things, so we invoke the power of existence so that we can remember, so that we can lift our eyes and open our ears to the true and beautiful. For 5,000 years or more, we have done this. In many tongues, in many ways, we have done this. And so we continue that ancient tradition in our way and in our time. And so let us now worship together. I will light a chalice here in my home, and you are welcome to light one in your home. Our church worship associate will also light the chalice at church. Please join me in speaking the words on your screen as we light the chalice, the symbol of our faith. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. The first hymn is My Life Flows On. And for those of you in our church building, please hum only. On Zoom, you are welcome to sing with the choir, or everyone is free to listen as the choir sings My Life Flows On.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far of him that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night
Each week we gather, we carry the sorrows and celebrations of our own lives. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like to share with the group, you can type it into the chat box and I will read it aloud for all those listening. For those in the sanctuary, if you didn't get a chance this week, you are welcome to submit your joys and sorrows on our Google form for next week to be read aloud. I will begin by lighting a candle in honor of all of the simple joys that are sustaining us. I will light another candle in honor of the sorrows and hardships we may be carrying. Our church worship associate at church will light candles for the joys and sorrows in the sanctuary as they are read. I will light one more candle in honor of the joys and sorrows we carry in our hearts but have not spoken aloud. And we share a moment of silence together. Some of us will experience that silence as a time for prayer, some as a time for meditation, and some simply as a time to honor what has been said and left unsaid. I invite you to take a breath and settle into this moment and into a silence of your understanding. Amen, and blessed be. As we continue to pay attention to what is in our hearts, we join together in singing or humming a quiet affirmation, voice still and small.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still we remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Our reading today is What Song by the Reverend Victoria Safford. What if there were a universe, a cosmos, that began in shining blackness, out of nothing, out of fire, out of a single silent breath, and into it came billions and billions of stars, stars beyond imagining, and near one of them, a world, a blue-green world so beautiful that learned clergymen could not even speak about it cogently. And brilliant scientists, in trying to describe it, began to sound like poets, with their physics, with their mathematics, their empirical, impressionistic musing. What if there were a universe in which such a world was born out of a smallish star, and into that world, at some point, flew red-winged blackbirds, and into it swam whales, and into it came crocuses, and wind to lift the tiniest hairs on naked arms in spring when you run out to the mailbox, and into it at some point came onions out of soil, and came Mount Everest, and also the coyote we've been seeing in the woods about a mile from here, just after sunrise in these mornings when the moon is full. Into that world came animals and elements and plants and imagination, the mind and the mind's eye. If such a universe existed and you noticed it, what would you do? What song would come out of your mouth? What prayer, what praises, what sacred offering, what whirling dance, what religion, and what reverential gesture would you make to greet that world every single day that you were in it?
If such a universe existed and you noticed it, what would you do? What song would come out of your mouth? What religion? That's the question we're explicitly asking this morning. When we pay attention to this earth and to this universe with its seemingly infinite beauty, when we pay attention not only to the vast cosmos, but to the wind that lifts the tiniest hairs on our arms, when we pay attention to how our hearts feel when we love another, when we pay attention, what is our response? This is a sermon in 2 parts with a musical reflection in the middle. If any of you read the blurb in the newsletter, this musical reflection is not actually Spirit of Life, as I had stated it would be. I will preach on that hymn at some point because it's a fascinating articulation of UU theology. But once I sat down to write, this sermon went in a different direction in response to conversations I've been having over the last 3 weeks with both longtime members and a number of newcomers. So, a sermon in 2 parts, part 1. Growing up, I was the kind of Catholic who willingly knelt by her bed every night to say a Hail Mary and a Glory Be. When I was in 8th grade, I taught Sunday school to kindergartners, and by the time I was a high school junior, I was leading the youth group and running youth retreats for a congregation of 10,000 members. I went to church every Sunday and always gave up something good for Lent. You can imagine my shock one Sunday morning at the age of 20, when midway through the Apostles' Creed, I realized I was lying. I did not believe in God, the Father Almighty, and I did not believe that Jesus Christ, his only Son, was conceived by the Holy Spirit, and I certainly didn't believe he will come again to judge the living and the dead. The foundation of my faith was shattered. Then, just a few weeks later, knowing my spiritual struggle, a friend handed me a copy of A Chosen Faith by John Behrens and Forest Church, a book describing the basic theology of Unitarian Universalism. As I read each word, I had the growing sense that I was on the edge of something both risky and inevitable. It was overwhelming to think about leaving the only religion I had ever known, but I couldn't ignore the pull of a faith that offered me authenticity, openness, and a commitment to justice. A few years, much research, and countless questions later, I attended First Universalist Church of Minneapolis for the first time. 5 minutes into the worship service, tears of gratitude began streaming down my face as I wondered at the knowledge that I had found my religious home. I was finally able to shed the theology, misogyny, and homophobia of the Catholicism of my childhood and don a more just and authentic religion. But then, when I got into my car after the service, something strange happened. I started really crying, sobbing even. Eventually, it hit me what all of those tears were about. I was grieving. As a Unitarian Universalist, I would never again partake in the ancient ritual of Catholic communion. I would never again say the rosary in a circle of women under the starry sky of northern Minnesota. I would never again, without feeling like an outsider and a fraud, whisper the same liturgical prayer during Mass that had passed through the lips of my grandmother and her mother and her mother. To this day, I honor the beauty of Catholic rituals. There are literally millions of Catholics who experience that faith as life-giving, and my task here is not to disparage any religion. But for me, my experience of Catholicism was that I was more scared of God's judgment than I was learning to embrace being fully alive in this world, more concerned with dogma than I was justice. It's like I was so worried about getting the words right, about following the rules so I would be deemed worthy, that there was no room in my heart for spirit to move. I was so focused on the structures of religion, I missed the point of it. I tell this story of my religious history because I think it shows something about the essence of a lifelong spiritual journey. It's a balance of both honoring the past and letting go of it. I'm certainly not only talking to former Catholics gathered here today, though I know there are some others of you. Whether you were raised religious or non-religious, evangelical Christian or Reformed Jew or secular atheist, or even Unitarian Universalist, each one of us holds a rich, complicated spiritual history. Each one of us is trying to figure out what of that heritage we will continue to honor and carry forward, and what we need to shed so we are able to hold new truths and make room for the spirit of love to move. What is something beautiful from your religious past, from your spiritual journey, that you want to carry more fully into the present? What do you want to continue to embrace? And what is it time to let go of? Toxic theology can cause pain and even spiritual trauma. The residue of shame, of fear, of feeling alone is real. Healing is possible, but it doesn't happen without intention and work. It's almost like we need a religious conversion to describe this process. In a sense, I converted from Catholicism to Unitarian Universalism in my early 20s. I am fully aware that the word conversion has some particularly troubling connotations when it comes to religion. Conversion is often used as a rallying point for a once-in-a-lifetime experience of salvation. For example, becoming a born-again Christian. Or maybe even more painful for many, it conveys the pressure to convert others to one's religion in order to save their souls. That is not how I'm using the word here. I'm not interested in converting people to Unitarian Universalism who are spiritually fulfilled in their own tradition through pressure or manipulation. But I also don't think we should be only wary of the sort of spiritual shift the word conversion describes. The spiritual essayist Kathleen Norris defines conversion from the Latin convertere, to turn around, as when our situation stays the same, but our perspective changes. Conversion is when our situation stays the same, but our perspective changes. A change of view, but not location. In this way, I converted from Catholicism to Unitarian Universalism, or more accurately, I am converting over and over again from how I used to view the world to how I experience it more and more fully today. In the words of Norris, conversion is a process, not a goal. This is the essence of Peter Mayer's remarkable song, Holy Now. I know many of you know it. This song is the story of how the world around Peter Mayer stayed the same, but his experience of it changed dramatically In a sense, he too converted from Catholicism to Unitarian Universalism. He's been a member of the White Bear UU Church. But the song is about more than any particular religious beliefs. It's about the shift from seeing the world as heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, from holding this world at arm's length, to experiencing it as sacred. This is a countercultural way of moving through the world. Whether you were raised religious or not, our culture tells us over and over that this world is meant to be used and discarded, that life is a collection of objects instead of a constellation of love. We're going to listen to this song now with this invitation. As you're listening, notice what word or image especially calls to you. Notice where your mind and heart go. Notice where your spirit is asking you to hold on to something and where you're being called to let go. Follow along with the lyrics on the screen if that helps your brain process, or close your eyes and soften your gaze and let the music wash over you. Holy Now by Peter Mayer.
When I was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick said anything is here at home. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with the reverend air, 'cause everything is holy now. Testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, I tell you that it can't be done. morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Everything is holy now. After the service today, I invite you to share the words and images that most called to you, or whatever thoughts and feelings they inspired in you during Zoom breakout rooms after the service, or during social distance chatting in the sanctuary, or with a friend or loved one, or a journal entry. Here's one way I came to articulate my conversion into not just different beliefs, but into a different way of being religious that Unitarian Universalism offers. I wrote part of this reflection, Everyday Theology, for the UU Spiritual Deepening Program, Wellspring. It is often said that Unitarian Universalists do not have a sacred text. Christians have the Bible, Muslims the Quran, but as UUs, we look everywhere. Poetry, science, nature, music. We believe religious inspiration is not confined to the pages of a single sacred text, but rather can be found the world over. The wide religious expanse is at the heart of our spiritual journeys and core to our Unitarian Universalist values. But while our search as UUs may be broad and wide, is it also deep? If we are looking everywhere, how do we focus our gaze on what's important? A metaphor to illustrate this tension. Imagine the truth, or in traditional religious language, God, is a rushing, tumbling river. We stand on this river's shores and dip our fingertips in it from time to time. We linger there, feeling baptized by beauty and mystery. But at some point, we have to turn around and face our daily lives, leaving that life-giving water in the background. But religion offers us a bucket, a way to carry the divine with us. Through parable, ritual, and fellowship, religion becomes a container of meaning. Fundamentalist religions seem to confuse the bucket for the water. They use rules and doctrine to build solid watertight containers, but inside, those buckets might remain dry, and some members might feel spiritually parched. Thankfully, UUs don't impose a rigid container on anyone. We know the water is what's important. But before getting too self-satisfied, though, I wonder, do UUs sometimes want to throw the bucket out entirely? Do we focus so much on being able to believe whatever we want that we are left with nothing to hang on to? To paraphrase writer Lillian Daniel, anyone can find God in a sunset. We know what it is like to touch the holy. Do we also know how to carry it with us into our daily lives and our hurting world? UUism doesn't offer a ready-made bucket, but it invites us to create our own. This doesn't just magically happen. It takes work, years and years of work. One way we can create a container of meaning that holds our deepest life experiences and biggest spiritual questions is by weaving together our own personal understanding of the 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism. These 6 sources are direct experience, words and deeds of prophetic people, world religions, Jewish and Christian teachings, humanist teachings, and earth-centered traditions. They offer us inspiration, courage, wisdom, love, reason, and connection. There is much to say about all 6 of the sources, but none is more important than the first. It is in many ways what sets UUs apart from both traditional Christianity and Islam. The first source of religious inspiration for Unitarian Universalists is, quote, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. This is the sacred text upon which our faith is built, not a hardbound holy book, but the testament of our own lives. Thus, in much the same way a Christian theologian reads the Bible, a UU theologian might read his or her own life, studying it closely for inspiration and meaning. In the words of Reverend Jen Crow, a UU minister and one of the creators of UU Wellspring, taken from the Greek word theos, meaning God, and logos, meaning word or reason, the word theology is generally understood to be any reasoned discourse concerning religion, spirituality, or God. Some define theology as talk of that which is of ultimate concern. Others call it God talk, and still others term it meaning making. For Unitarian Universalists, theological reflections tend to include reflection upon our own personal life experiences, the use of conscience and reason, appreciation of the beliefs of others, and a commitment to the revelation of truth as an ongoing phenomenon. I view theology as the individual system of meaning making we each develop throughout our lives. Largely dependent upon our individual contexts, our theology helps us make sense of the world and the events that take place in it, and it builds the framework upon which we tell our stories. In other words, you are a theologian, reading and interpreting your own life. The Reverend Kathleen Mateague, director of the UU College of Social Justice, makes time for this personal reflection every night. Quote, my spiritual practice consists of this. I think back on the events of the day and ask the question, where was God in this day? It's a question that can be asked in a dozen different theological voices. And if God language fails to resonate for you, then we might ask merely, where today did I really hear the language of my life? The question puts a sheen of attentiveness and care on even the most mundane dimensions of the day. It gives us a way to cradle the moments of the day just lived and see them again before they're too far away. Being the theologian of your own life is the work of meaning making and bucket building. It is the work of looking closely and deeply at your authentic self, your relationships, and your world, and finding their purpose and connection. You might ask yourself, where was God in this day? Or how has direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder changed me? Or what shows up again and again as my ultimate concern? Or in the words from the reading today, what if there were a universe in which a world was born out of a smallish star, and into that world at some point flew red-winged blackbirds, and into it swam whales, and into it came crocuses? If such a universe existed and you noticed it, what would you do? What reverential gesture would you make to greet that world every single day you are in it? Maybe it's not that I will never again participate in the ancient ritual of communion. Maybe I don't have to throw out that bucket entirely. Maybe it's that I know communion when I touch the waters of Lake Superior. Maybe I hear a testament to how the world should be when I listen to Black Lives Matter activists. And maybe I know vaccine science as holy work, as pictures of children getting their COVID shots fill my Facebook feed. This can get tricky in UU religious community, though. I asked earlier what from your religious past you want to bring more fully into the present and what you want to believe behind and what you want to leave behind. The challenge in UU religious communities is that those two things sometimes conflict when what someone wants to hang on to is exactly the thing that someone else needs to let go of. Prayer is a prime example. For some, prayer is a fundamentally authentic spiritual response to this universe, a naming of our deepest fears and hopes. For others, prayer was used as a weapon, a way to reinforce shame and exert control. How do we make room for all of this? In the words of UU minister, the Reverend Gretchen Haley, we can only answer this question when we dig deep into the wells of our past, when we let the waters of our collective and individual spiritual histories flow freely and fully to quench the thirst of our everyday lives. Unitarian Universalism should feel like a faith where everything is on the table, where nothing is out of bounds or off limits, a faith big enough for everyone, with depths beyond what any one of us can discover alone. But this doesn't work when we must tiptoe in our conversations so as not to bring up someone's religious past. Rather than a big faith capable of great depths, we end up with a polite community that sometimes doesn't feel like church. We can only change this in our congregations when we create adequate space for silence, for contradiction, for forgiveness, when we listen to those places where we expect weeping and instead find song. If there is an injury in our spiritual past, we must help one another heal it. We must encourage one another to do the real work of spiritual growth. There are depths to be discovered beyond what any one of us can discover alone. We don't just convert to Unitarian Universalist once. We are called to a lifetime of discovery of what it means to be fully alive in this broken and beautiful world. How will we greet not only the red-winged blackbird, but ourselves and each other every single day? What song will we sing? What praises? What whirling dance? What religion? And why will it matter? As Unitarian Universalists, we cast our lot with the healers and the justice seekers, with the outcasts and the seekers, with the mystics and the scientists who are often one and the same. There is room for all of us, and there is room for the fullness of you, your doubts and wisdom, your sorrows and joys. Let us commit again and again to this work as we take seriously the task of both honoring and healing our religious past as we seek to build the beloved community together. May it be so, and amen. It is good to be on this journey together. We turn our attention now to the wider world as we take our offertory. Half of the money donated today will go to Honor the Earth. Honor the Earth uses Indigenous wisdom, music, art, and the media to raise awareness and support for Indigenous environmental issues. They leverage this awareness and support to develop financial and political capital for Indigenous struggles, for land and life. For more information on this amazing organization, go to honorearth.org. Whether you're in person with a cell phone handy or on Zoom, you may contribute right now online by going to our website, uunorthfield.org, clicking on the yellow donate button on the right-hand column, and then selecting share the plate. If you prefer using a check, you can mail a check made payable to UUFN, or if you're in person, the ushers will now collect cash or check offerings. Separate checks marked UUFN pledge are also welcome. As always, thank you for giving as you are able.
Please join us in singing our final hymn, Spirit of Life, with our own UUFN choir, audio mix recording from Mijid van der Weege, and video from Paul Kraus. We are happy to have you sing with muted mics if you are at home on Zoom, and ask that you hum only if you are at the church building for the safety of those around you. Please join me as we extinguish our chalice here and in your homes. You will see the words on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until